Hey everyone, we're going to look at parties and campaigns. Political parties are basically out there to get candidates on a ballot and to get those candidates elected into office. They are different from interest groups who basically don't care which political party you belong to, just as long as you believe in their issue that they are trying to push. A political party wants to get its members elected into office. In the United States, we have a two-party system. We have what we would call a single-member district system. Duverger's law says because we have a single-member district system, that's how we end up getting a two-party system. And then one of the offshoots as well is that we have an electoral college, which benefits one of two of the major political parties when it comes to running for president. Why two parties? Well, basically, the United States is kind of a centrist country. We're not too liberal. We're not too conservative. We have state laws that make it difficult for third parties to get on the ballot, whether it means that you have to get like 15 signatures to get on the ballot or 15,000 signatures to get on the ballot. They make it very difficult for political parties to do so. Also, it's very expensive to run for office, and the two major parties have the money. The minor parties don't. In our nation's history, we have 5 party systems, and these party eras or party systems kind of define the direction that political parties were going to go in. So in the first party system, we had the Federalist Party and the Democratic Republican Party. In the second political system, we had the Whigs, and we also had the Democrats, and then we were going to slowly get into the Republican Party. The Republican Party is going to be in the third party system versus the Democrats, and you'll notice that the Democrats and Republicans are in the third party, the fourth party, and the current fifth party system as well. What makes these political parties still existent, why they exist today, is that they're able to reinvent themselves with the changing times, and as long as they reinvent themselves with the changing times, they can exist. If they don't change, they're going to fall apart. That's why you still see the same two political parties since basically 1854 to the present. We have a lot of partisanship in the United States today. Based on where you live, it might determine whether or not Republicans win or whether or not Democrats win. We also have something called party realignment. These are the periodic changes that you find within the political parties. As I mentioned before, when the party reinvents themselves, they stay viable, they stay relevant, and by doing so, they realign themselves in order to stay out in the public sphere. So in this case, we had, like I said, 2 political parties since the 1850s, and they've been the only 2 competitive parties that we've had in our nation. We also have something called divided government, and we have something called de-alignment. De-alignment goes along with the idea that voters today don't find themselves to be members of a political party. They call themselves independent. Even though they call themselves independent, they don't vote independent. They don't vote third party. What they do is they tend to vote Democrat or Republican, but the Democrats and Republicans have to earn their support rather than be guaranteed of their support like they used to in the past. As I mentioned in the past, and as I mentioned in this slide as well, we have partisanship where you have strong Republican support and you have strong Democratic support, and there's no budging or breaking on the two. A good party structure knows how to fundraise. Democrats and Republicans have no problem fundraising these days. You'll also find that they have what they call national conventions, but you'll also find not only in the national convention stage, you'll also find that the state parties are very strong, and they have their own state conventions. Another concern of a political party is being able to elect people not only for president, but for the House and Senate. So their job is to fundraise for those seats as well. In our nation's history, we've had hundreds upon thousands of third parties, but they're very ideological or single-issue parties. They're break off from the major party type of parties. So their audience is very limited. Let's just put it that way. So it makes it very difficult for them to get elected if they talk to a narrow group of people all the time. Here are some of the biggest third parties that we've had in our nation's history, from the anti-Masonic Party all the way to the Green Party. They don't have the Libertarian Party up there, but also the Libertarian Party you can throw in there as well. A big thing that candidates do from the major parties is they spend most of their time trying to fundraise and raise money for their campaigns. In order to become a general election candidate, you run as a nominee. You go through what we call the primary system. There are two major types of primaries, an open primary system and a closed primary system. In order for you to get to the general election ballot, you have to win your primary. Whether you're a Democrat or a Republican, they all have primaries for the most part. At the presidential level, they have what they call a caucus in some states. The most famous caucus is the Iowa caucus. You don't normally see caucuses take place at the for local elections or state elections or even House or Senate elections for that matter. In other states like California and in Washington, you have what is called a top two primary, where you have all of the candidates on one ballot, regardless if they're Republican or Democrat, and whoever finishes with the first highest total and the second highest total, they run against each other in a runoff election. Also, some states require runoff elections if nobody gets a majority of the vote. For example, if there are three candidates running for Senate in Georgia, for example, Georgia is a state that has a runoff election. If nobody gets a majority of those three candidates, the top two candidates then have to run against each other in a runoff election. And then finally, one of the biggest things that you find with campaigns is that the incumbent, the person who's already in office, benefits from a lot of fundraising ability. People contribute money to candidates that they know rather than the candidates that they don't know. They get their face on television many, many times, whether they pay for it or whether they're just interviewed by a reporter. It makes it very difficult for a challenger to compete in a political campaign. But just because you are an incumbent and you have all of this money and you belong to a major party doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to win the election, because it all boils down to who actually shows up and votes on election day. So political parties have to have voter mobilization teams to make sure that their voters show up on election day.